Bom dia, obrigada por terem vindo. Vou mudar para inglês, como vocês sabem, essa é uma série de eventos, todos os eventos acontecendo em inglês. So switching to English. Thank you all very much for coming. I am Gio. I am responsible for marketing here at campus. And I am thrilled to be here today on behalf of the entire campus team to welcome you and to thank you for attending another of our Campus Expert Summit event, which by the time you may already know that it's a 2-week programming that we put together. And we brought 16 Googlers from all over the world with various different backgrounds and expertise to work with Googlers, work with startups here at campus, and help them grow, right? So they are mentoring those startups. They are here available for all of these free events that we're having. So count on them. They're here for you. So thank you all for coming. But the main thing that we are all here for is Matthew Conroy, right? So Matthew is today based in UK, in London, but he was born in New York. He's been at Google for like 6 years. And well, this was pretty much one of the most anticipated events that we have. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming to the stage Matthew Conroy.
Bom dia. Meu nome é Matt. Eu sou o gringo que vai falar sobre produtos. Vou falar tudo em português. É tudo bem? That's actually all I know. I'll be honest. I've used it all up. And as you can see, I spent so much time working on those few lines that I do not have any slides. So actually, we will bring up the presentation, I think. I'll ask the wizards in the sky. Oh, there we go. That should help. All right. There actually are slides, actually more than you need, so I hope you're well caffeinated. I do want to say, before I get started, though, just how delighted I am to be here. The warmth and hospitality you guys have shown our entire group, even just the last few days, has been amazing. It's really only been topped by the quality of your thinking that we've seen in these sessions, the sharpness of your questions, and really just the passion you guys have shown for solving problems worth solving. So I'm really delighted to be here. But fine, enough with that. As I think I said in Portuguese a couple of minutes ago, my name is Matt. I am indeed a gringo from New York. I now live in London with a few stops in between, none of which have as nice weather as here, maybe a little bit of San Francisco. I'm confident that after this holiday weekend, I'm probably going to add Rio to the list of places I will have lived. And as Gio said, I've been a product manager at Google for around 6 years. And actually, how many of you attended Anname's talk the other night about machine learning? Okay, half the room or so. So I could tell you about my professional background before Google, but I thought that would be no fun, and especially after Anname's talk, I started playing with the Faces API that recognized certain features, and I came up with a new backstory for myself, and that is hipster pirate scuba diver, which I feel like is my actual calling. So I am a product manager, though, and I wanted to, as part of explaining a little bit about why I get up and go to work every day, I actually wanted to start off with a quick video.
The actual moonshot is wonderful, inspirational, poetic, beautiful, involved great technical challenges, genuine heroism. It brought the world together. But think about the Polynesian islander on the dugout canoe, deciding one day they were going to go that way. No one had ever been that way before. No one even knew if there was anything that way before. It was amazing, and it changed the world.
People can set their minds to magical, seemingly impossible ideas, and then through science and technology, bring them to reality. and that then sets other people on fire, that other things that look impossible might be accomplishable.
Galileo is such a hero, in thinking big, and what he represents to me is both curiosity and wonder that humanity had, that pushed him and drove himself to invent and work on the first telescopes that allowed us to see the moon, and here we are.
These aviation pioneers were figuring it out as they went. No one really knew how to build an airplane, right? No one knew how to fly an airplane. It was amazing and crazy and wonderful, and they wanted to explore.
Many years ago, the great British explorer George Mallory, who was to die on Mount Everest, was asked why did he want to climb it. He said, because it is there.
There's so many challenges in the world, and you can feel daunted by that, and sort of oppressed by that, or you kind of say, how might we think differently about this?
Everyone else in the world is working on that next 10%. If you can be the one that delivers that 10 times improvement, you have a chance to really change things.
If you want cars to run at 50 miles per gallon, fine, you can retool your car a little bit. But if I tell you it has to run on a gallon of gas for 500 miles, you have to start over.
You need a lot of courage in this work, and you need a lot of persistence. One of the things that's really critical is not only having the courage to keep trying every day or thinking big, even if you don't really 100% believe it's possible, like you might think this might be possible, have the courage to try. That's how the greatest things have happened.
You don't spend your time being bothered that you can't teleport from here to Japan, because there's a part of you that thinks it's impossible. Moonshot thinking is choosing to be bothered by that.
We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard.
Humanity's progress has been a series of amazing, audacious things, from the very small and personal up to the great, big, and grand. And we are a species of moonshots. And to me, that's like the really amazing, poetic, and inspirational thing.
I think our ambitions are a glass ceiling on what we can accomplish.
When you find your passion, you're unstoppable. You can make amazing things happen. It's been true through all of history.
I believe in the human spirit, and I believe that there are always going to be crazy people who will get out of bed one morning and say, you know what? I think I can build a space elevator, and let's go do it. But I think that if we become afraid to take these great big risks, we stop inspiring people. We stop achieving things. And the biggest nightmare scenario is that we won't have what it takes to solve the really big challenges.
When Kennedy said that we would put a man on the moon, it's about the fact that he said, we don't know how to do this yet, and we're gonna do it anyway. And that sends chills up everybody's spine. Because if that happens, what couldn't we do?
So that is why I do what I do, and I think that's why you guys do what you do. And I see a lot of reflection in what these guys are talking about in each of the meetings I've had with you guys so far this week. A couple of quick disclaimers before we get going. This is called the Campus Expert Summit, but I will tell you right now that product management is about graceful and useful failure. So a lot of what I'm going to be talking about is avoiding mistakes that I've already made. And for those of you who were at the data discussion yesterday, I make a lot of them. And I think that's part of what makes my job fun, but I do want to say, don't worry if you forget anything from this. Part of this is also to start a conversation for the meetings we have this week and next, and give you guys a vocabulary to talk about product with your teams. Second disclaimer, there is a fair amount of material here. I am going to ask for participation from the audience, and definitely come up with some questions so that I'm not awkwardly standing here at the end going, no, nobody? All right, so what are we going to talk about? This presentation is really about thinking about product development and also inherently the product development lifecycle. So we're really going to talk about from cradle to grave, knowing your users, figuring out what you're going to build, building it, prioritizing what to fix when things go wrong, and then experimenting and iterating on the solution. All right, here's what I think your job looks like. And I also think it gels very well with what the job of a product manager is like. You guys have an incredibly tough job to do, but you're already out on that limb. So part of what I want to do with this presentation is keep you guys out on that limb as long as possible. What you'll see here is that your job really changes over time, right? When you guys are starting out, you're the visionary. You're those guys on that video talking about what we should do, what problems we should solve without having a clear idea of what you're going to do next. Then you figure out what you're going to do, and now you're starting to hire teams and manage your resources and coordinate amongst new folks that join your org. Then you launch, right? And now you're running around spinning plates, right? Becoming as much a marketer and a spokesperson and an ambassador as a product guy. And then, of course, the work never ends. You're going to start to do more analysis, figure out what you did well, what you did wrong, right? And go back to the drawing board. And you should think about your job changing in that way over time. And it's not a sign that anything's going wrong. It's a natural part of the process. So let's start with the most fundamental thing about building products, which is knowing who you're building them for. Google's #1 tenet, which they started with almost 15 years ago now, is focus on the user and all else will follow. It's very easy to let the cart lead the horse, right? Come up with a great piece of technology that works beautifully. If you don't have the user problem in mind that you're trying to solve, then you don't have a product yet. And what's really challenging about building products today is users have an outsized expectation now of what is possible. What used to be limited to paper maps or even laptops is now all easy in the palm of my hand. I really like this example. Many of you probably already use the Translate app, but here you have someone in real time through the viewer on their camera reading what I also think is Portuguese, and good timing as well, because the road has collapsed and they appear to be driving. So this just gives you a sense for the bar has been raised, right? And you need to remember that as you go, that your users now have this expectation that things are going to work in their palm of their hand. They have to work fast, seamlessly, and be always on. And I know many of you are working with some of our UX experts and others to address exactly some of these. The other thing I want to talk about, it just dovetails a little bit on Tamsin's speech from yesterday, is we have to think globally. And when you're learning about your users' needs, those needs are very likely, in fact, to differ from your own. This example was done from some research in Mexico. You can see here, we thought we had built a great feature, right? He left the zoo with his kids. He had all these photos. They instantly uploaded to Google+. Spent all of his data right away, right? And this is valuable data he needs to communicate with his family. And something we thought was going to be delightful, right? He was angry. That's a total failure for us. And why did that happen? Because that feature was developed in Silicon Valley, California, right? Where everyone has unlimited data and 4G and is Wi-Fi everywhere, right? And we didn't meet the users where they are. Right? And that's the main takeaway here, is if you want to build for other markets, you have to meet the users where they are, because their needs are very likely to differ from your own. So, with that in mind, let's go meet the users where they are. And we're going to talk a little bit about conducting user research and how to do that well. And the main takeaway that I hope you get from this section, if you ignore everything else I say, is that there are about a dozen ways to conduct user research. Right? So I want to get you guys familiar with the variety of ways you can collect this information. And what your challenge is to go back and talk to your team about how to match which version of getting that information will match the problem you're trying to solve or the questions you're trying to answer from your users. All right, so let's talk about some things we want to do. If you're trying to analyze things, what kind of data can you use? What kind of information can you collect? Well, we have analytics, right? And many of you are working with Kelly this week probably to tweak your analytics setups. You can look at research reports, right? Stuff from the industries in which you work. Many of you are working in industries that you may be trying to transform, but there is research out there about the trends affecting those businesses. And same thing with the markets in which you operate. Observe, right? Now we're actually, again, like getting in the face of our users. So there's 3 kinds of things I want to call out here. Usability studies. This is very common in the UX world. That's about watching your users, without your help, work through your product, seeing where they get hung up. One of the big challenges we have is we're all very close to what we're building, right? It's very difficult to see why a user would get hung up. We know we have the right answer, right? But that's not always clear to the people you're actually trying to reach. Diary studies. This is about going into the homes of your users. Not like without their permission, though. Seriously. That never ends well. Diary studies. You go in, you talk to them, you see how your product fits into their workflow, fits into their daily life, right? You look at the 3 minutes before and after they use your product, right? And figure out exactly where you fit into their lives. And field visits, same kind of thing, right? Go meet users where they are. And for those of you who are looking to go internationally, like, this is one of the chief things that you'll have to do over the next few months. Final thing I want to talk about is about asking, right? And about asking those questions to the users directly. And there's 3 different kinds of those as well. Surveys. You guys are probably familiar with surveys and probably running them all the time. But there's an inherent limitation to surveys, right? Like, imagine if I asked you about mobile phone preferences, right? And I said, do you care about speed? And you'd go, yeah. And it'd be like, do you care about the phone design? Yeah. Do you care about features? Yeah. What about the camera? Yeah. Battery? Yeah, right? Then what am I left with? How do I know what to prioritize, right? So there are actually different kinds of surveys that can help you answer some of those complicated questions. There's actually a thing called conjoint surveys. How many of you have heard of that? Okay, a couple. So bear with me. And if you know it better than I do, please just keep quiet, because that will be really embarrassing for me. So basically, conjoint surveys are this way that you can actually get users to trade off different sets of preferences. And what's really exciting about that is what emerges are customer clusters, where you know that actually there's a big cluster that cares really just about battery and camera, right? Or there's actually one that cares a lot about durability and doesn't really care about the feature set. So that could help you tease out some of the things that you may be struggling with around prioritization. Again, I'm really just trying to arm you with a toolkit here that you can go and apply to your product in particular. And then obviously interviews, right? You should be doing that with each other already because you have a whole building full of potential users that you can talk to. And focus groups. Focus groups are great because actually a different thing happens when you get a bunch of users together. They can start to ask and answer questions from each other. They start agreeing and disagreeing. So think about that as another potential tool. Everybody get all that? Photos down? Okay. All right, so now we know a little bit about our users, right? We know a little bit about what they want, what they're struggling with, right? We have a sense of the problems we're trying to solve. So let's define and evaluate what we're actually going to offer and how we're going to do it. Defining your critical user journeys. Vocabulary word. Definitely didn't translate this into Portuguese this morning. I want to use this term because it's something that we use a lot back at Google to make sure that what we're doing is actually serving our main purpose. And again, a critical user journey is really just the path through your product that users take in order to accomplish their main goal, right? And I mean that from beginning to end, right? From when they open your product from the very first time to when they complete whatever it is that you want them to actually do. And critically, they're defined by user needs, not features, okay? A lot of time, and this comes back to a little bit of what we were saying before, but we get stuck into this game of building more and more features that are actually not central to what the user is using your product for, right? That's not gonna keep them coming back. That's not gonna get them in the front door in the first place. The need really is that central problem, that central goal that the user is trying to accomplish with your product, whereas the feature, okay, is what you're going to build, how you're going to address it, and the need has to come first. So we're going to play a little game. I want to share my trip memories with my friends or family. Is that a need or a feature? How many say need? How many say it's a feature? Just one. It's a need, right? That's what they're trying to do. There's no sort of inherent like technological solution in that statement, right? It's like what we're trying to accomplish. What about I want to upload a video to YouTube? Feature, right? And in fact, probably a decent feature for that need, right? What about I want to swap the starting and ending destinations on maps? Feature, right? Yeah, it's how I'm going to solve the next problem, right? I'm out to dinner somewhere and want to get back home, right? So when you're with your team and you get trapped into talking about features, go back to the need. What are you trying to accomplish? Ask that question 17 million times a day And if the feature you're building, you can't tie that directly back to a need that you have decided as a team matters, then it's a total waste of time. All right. How are we doing so far? We good? Yeah? People are surviving? Okay. All right. So there's two types of journeys that I want to talk about in your product. And we call them toothbrush and pivotal. We call the toothbrush journey because it's basically like imagine something you might do twice a day, like within your product. So those are frequent and important journeys. Those are those key touch points that you have multiple times, right? Uploading a video might be a good example of that for YouTube. Pivotal journeys. Those are the ones that don't happen very often, but when they go wrong, they go really wrong. I'll give you an example of that. Like, has anybody ever lost their password to Google? Oh, I heard some rumbles. Yeah, that is a pivotal journey, right? It doesn't happen very often, but when I see lots of smiles, but when it happens, okay, that's a critical moment where Google has to be there for you, right? I mean, you don't have access to emails, your contacts, your docs, whatever else you need. When we get that wrong, we lose your heart and your mind around the company, right? So make sure that you're thinking about both of those types of journeys within your product. All right, let's just do a couple of examples here. Toothbrush journey, you might have, I want to find a restaurant and navigate to it. Okay, I actually want to get there. It makes sense. Do that a couple times a week, maybe. I want to open and edit a document in G Suite, right? So G Suite is the new name for the collection of enterprise products. But here, think about Google Docs, right, which many of you use. Let's talk about those pivotal journeys. I want to start a Hangouts video call for the first time. Okay, this is like Hangouts' chance to sell you on the service it provides. That should work right out of the box, right away. Or I want to register my business with Google My Business so my customers know how to find me, right? If we get that wrong, we lose you forever, right? So think about the journeys through your product through these two lenses, right? What pivotal journeys are going to get them in the door and keep them there? And what toothbrush journeys are they going to have as touch points every single day? So it's hard to see from farther away than I am, but every single one of these things is a mobile screen as part of the same flow. You're probably going, if it takes that many steps to do something, there's no way I'm talking about a successful product, right? Like, you guys would agree with that, wouldn't you? Like, that is insane. I'm talking about YouTube. I'm actually talking about YouTube. And I want to show you that a product as successful and wide-ranging as YouTube got this totally wrong.
We actually sat down and walked through the steps it would take for a new user to upload their first video.
They went from the app to mobile web, and they went through a few steps and then went back to the app.
We found that it was 50 steps.
Is this the kind of experience that we want a user to have the first time they interact with YouTube? We wanted to make that journey in particular really, really awesome and simple for users.
A lot of the times, the reasons our journeys weren't excellent is because those journeys span multiple teams.
We worked together with product and UX designers in order to get an idea of what users should be seeing in order to simplify the journey, taking steps out of other people's UIs and putting them within YouTube itself.
Only 10% of users actually managed to finish this flow.
Very likely a lot less than 10%. Now we've gotten the channel creation flow in our mobile app down to a single view.
Now we just ask your name and allow you to proceed.
We know that about 50% of users who even seen this flow has finished them.
We're continuing to look to see other places where we can simplify the login and sign-in process.
We're really excited around our goal for the end of the year, which is to make 100% of YouTube's critical journeys awesome.
Who remembers from the video what the change in completion rate was? Yeah, something like 10 to 50. Do you realize what an impact that has for YouTube, right? And imagine those 50 steps for the countries that are coming online in the rest of the, the rest of the world, the next billion people who will come online. can you 50 steps, you'd get way less than 10%, right? This is make or break for a product like YouTube. And like, it's actually hard to imagine that something could grow to 50 steps over time, which is why, like, we're going through this today, is that you have to be absolutely vigilant that as you add new features and bells and whistles, that you return to your core principles about what you're trying to solve and get out of the user's way. Oops, all right. You'd think I'd be better at this. All right. The last little vignette I want to talk about in terms of defining who you are and what you're going to build is encourage you guys to be open to when change occurs. There's going to be some things that you can control, and there's going to be some things that you can't control. Maybe the conditions in your market change. Maybe your team changes. Maybe you guys had a fundamental realization that you have some great technology, but the business model you have doesn't quite work. Be open to changing who you are, right? Be open to those opportunities to pivot. Evaluate those new options. I want to talk about 4 companies, which all of you will have heard of, and probably all assume started out doing what they do now. None of these did. Not a single one. PayPal actually started as a company called Confinity, which was designed to send money between PDAs. Starbucks actually started selling espresso machines and coffee beans long before it ever opened stores in a European-style cafe. Nintendo, this one shocked the hell out of me. Nintendo actually used to sell vacuum cleaners and rice and run short-stay motels, if you can believe it. And then in the 1960s, they were like, maybe we should make video games. I had no idea Mario was into short-stay hotels. Instagram, which I'm confident everyone in this room uses, given I imagine many of you have switched from me to Instagram by this point in the presentation. Instagram actually started as a check-in app with pieces of like gameplay, like from Mafia Wars and those early Facebook thing. And then they were, you know what they said? They said, we think the UI is too cluttered. Let's just focus on photos. And of course, you know, billions of dollars later and billions of users later, you have the Instagram you know today, right? So what you should take away from this is that you're not necessarily going to hit on the $1 million idea on day one, or the $1 million way to flex the technology you've built or flex the business model you've built. So constantly be open to those new opportunities. It actually, on a much smaller scale than talking about full companies, this happens to me all the time at work. When we work on a project, and especially if it's your own idea, which as founders, it's likely to be the case, you get very emotionally attached, right, to the solution you've built, the solution you've devised, right? And that can lead to these blind spots about what's going on around you, right? That's where you need to lean on the rest of your team, right? Lean on all the user research we talked about, so you make sure that you're actually hearing the information that's coming through. Cool. Prioritizing. Who here thinks prioritization is like a difficult issue or challenging for them and not enough time in the day? Okay, most of the room, and the other half are lying to yourselves. Just absolutely lying to yourself. So we talked about this a little bit before, but please don't spend your valuable dev time on any features unless you can articulate exactly how it helps your users accomplish their goals. Okay? I can't say anything more fundamental than that about prioritization. But we will, because I have more slides. So I want to use an interesting analogy which has helped me think about prioritization, and I've started using as an interview question at Google, which is the analogy of a product as, you know, a city or a neighborhood, and bugs or issues or features as streets and potholes and issues like that we can feel and touch and drive over, which I feel like Sao Paulo has a couple of potholes in the roads. So I feel like this might resonate. And you know, you might look at a city and you might have little things you need to correct all over the place. So how do we decide what to do first, right? Well, one option, right, is we fix the biggest potholes, right? Like, let's fix the potholes that the most people are complaining about, right? cars falling into them, bottoming out, right? Like, let's just figure out who's called the most for a particular pothole, and we'll go fix that. That's an option, right? Another option is about fixing a single terrible street, right? And think of that street as a feature set, right? I can make sure that that particular feature is as good as it can be. Can anybody think of a better option than these two things? Sorry? More traffic. Okay. How might we describe like where there's more traffic and some of the language we've talked about up to now in the presentation? Oh, I think I heard it. Yeah. Say more. Yeah, right? Like, what about fixing that critical user journey, right, in that product, right? Fixing the thing that actually inhibits your user from completing their fundamental goal, right? That's the issue, right, that you want to start with. It's certainly a valuable approach to go, let's fix the critical user journey here, and then fix the squeakiest wheels, right? The biggest reported issues. But start your prioritization, okay, by thinking critically about which things are getting in the way of the fundamental offering that we're giving our users, right? That's what you need to fix first, no matter how big or small it is, right? That's what you have to worry about. One of the things that we talk about all the time at Google is that it's okay to launch an imperfect product. And while that can be a dangerous strategy sometimes, right, if you don't get that right, it actually very much is aligned with this kind of approach, right? Like, yes, even if I fix that street, I've got some other potholes, I've got some bugs, right? But at the end of the day, your users are going to be able to do what you're promising them, right? And that's actually what matters. And that's what you need their feedback on. All right, avoiding the pitfalls. As I said, this is as much a presentation about mistakes as what to do. So we are going to look at a bunch of examples of where products got things wrong. And they're all going to be Google examples. So you can see that we make mistakes constantly. Why am I doing this? One, wake you up. It's been like 45 minutes since any of you have had coffee. Second thing I want to do is I want to kind of tune everyone's brain and eyes to pick apart something they see and like have that critical view of what might be going wrong. And I also want to give you guys a sort of a shared vocabulary if you have meetings with more of the mentors in the next 2 weeks, I want to give you guys a shared vocabulary for how to talk about these things, like where we're going wrong, where we might be making missteps. And finally, that note says it all, like we make mistakes all the time at Google. Building great products is inherently a difficult thing, and I want to show you exactly how a big company gets it wrong so often. All right. These are the things that we are going to look at. Don't worry about the slide. We will go through it. The first one is about user choice. And what I really mean by this is like making it harder for users to accomplish their goals. Let me set the stage for what you're seeing here. So I've taken a photo, right? I've taken a photo, and now I click that button, right, that I want to do something with that photo, and this is what I see. Can somebody tell me what is wrong with this? Yep, it is alphabetical, but what's bad about it being alphabetical? I know something about how it's organized then. Good. All right, so I'm hearing the right answers, right? It's too long, right? It's confusing. I know how it's organized, but I could do way better. That's really what it comes down to. I share photos on my phone all the time. Why in the world would my phone not give me the thing that I want first and nothing else, right? Or have that natively, right? Like, why am I overloading the user with so many choices, right? That's not helping them accomplish their goal, right? It's getting in the way. It's actually trying to show it's actually showing the seams, right, from the engineering side, right? We're all putting this stuff in there, right, so we can show the user that we have something complete. But it's actually just getting in their way. Navigation. I love this example, actually. So this is Calendar, which many of you probably also use. And I've marked a couple of different things. Can people throw out some ideas about what's wrong here? Yeah, right? That's brutal. Like here I've written down like, you know, Ben and Lucia's meeting, right? And we're gonna connect those two on Friday. It's gonna be awesome. And I've invited everyone, and I'm like, maybe I have to go back out to the home screen or like mistap, and boom, all my work's gone, right? This is the kind of thing you want to think about, right? And as you're building for mobile, and there's another session on mobile which you should absolutely attend, you need to think about how your product's going to work on different phones for different users, different sizes, different thumbs, right? A perfectly valid additional example here would have been like, these are tiny touch targets to do something fundamental, right? Like editing an event or saving an event, right? There's also one kind of sneaky one about save. Anybody want to come up with that one? This is a little bit weirder, right? It's basically like, so you tend to do stuff from top to bottom, right? Like you're filling up, yeah, right? Okay, I saw it. I saw the light bulb go off. You want to? Yeah. Right, exactly, right? That's why I get so many clicks on that delete button, right? Because I'm expecting that to be save. And yet now I've finished this thing and I got to scroll back up to hit save. Counterintuitive, exactly. So why am I getting in the user's way here? Feedback. Feedback is something that, you know, you guys probably have login screens and other things like that. What's wrong with this guy? Yeah, I haven't entered anything. And I'm already telling the user they've done something wrong. Like, get out of here, right? What would actually be useful information here? Password requirements might be a useful thing to put here, right? Instead of like slapping the user on the wrist about something before they've even done it, right? All right, let's talk about consistency, right? This is a big problem for Google, right? I mean, you know, for you guys who are just getting off the ground, you probably haven't developed all the technical debt that will cause this problem for you yet, but it's something to think about. What's wrong with this picture? Yeah, in two different places, right? Like as a user, how am I supposed to know like where to access that feature, right? I should have a baseline understanding of like where to go in the product to do what I want to do, right? If I now have it in two places, do I know that I'm getting the same thing? I don't know. I have to ask these questions. And anytime the user is asking questions about how to use your product, you've lost valuable time to engage them on what they actually care about, right? Language. This one should be easy. What's wrong with this? Don't know what that means, right? Anybody know what that means? I don't know what it means. Maybe. I don't know. Like, probably. But like, why is that a problem that it's like unclear here? Yeah, it's not only is it confusing, but I want to point out another thing that's really hard for all of us who work in tech, right? Do I feel welcome in this product if I don't know this language? Like, I start to ask some fundamental questions, right? I start to ask some fundamental questions about, like, is this for me? I mean, you can see how damaging that would be, right? Like, you never want users to come into your product and feel unwelcome, right? And feel like this isn't a place they understand, that this is going to be too hard, right? This is going to be too difficult, too technical. You're setting their expectations with something as basic as like adding a phone number to their phone, right? How are they going to approach brand new complicated features that you have, right? That might require more explanation. They're not really going to trust you off the bat, right? Internationalization. Won't spend a ton of time on this one because I know you guys are thinking about this already. But you have to get this right? The world is a big, complicated place, right? This comes back to making your users feel welcome as well. If you're not speaking their language or you're making it hard for them to read the things that they want to read, then you're not really doing them a service at all, right? You're actually showing that this product isn't for them, right? That you know, you didn't take time to prioritize the language in which they want to communicate it. Performance. What do we think is wrong with this guy? So what you're seeing is this screen is loading, and then these icons pop in. Right? It's too slow, right? I used to work on that product, by the way. I got to own up to that one. Like, I literally worked on that. It's way too slow, right? I mean, like in this world where speed kills, right? Speed is the killer app, right? This is jarring, right? It also might make for me to click on the wrong thing, right? Which is exactly what you don't want your user to do. This one's easy, right? Aesthetics. Make yourself at home. Welcome. Welcome. Go through, work with Ryan this week. Go through your product, right? Go through your product with all the other mentors, right? Take a test drive. Don't feel shy. Don't feel embarrassed if something is wrong, right? Like, that's what we're there to look through together. Discoverability. This one's a little harder to see from an image, so I'll talk about this. Again, it's about making your users feel welcome. This is the accessibility setting, which is buried under 5 layers of settings in Android. 5. So if I'm a user who needs particular settings, and I open Android, am I going to feel welcome? Am I going to be able to get what I need to do? No, right? I've got to go through 5 settings. How am I going to know that accessibility is next to date and time? Like, what does that make sense, right? Like, one is about how I'm going to interact with my phone on a daily basis. The other is about setting the time zone, right? What did we do there? We've also belittled that issue, right? We didn't get that right. Error states. Kind of similar, right, to the one we talked about before. This is ridiculous, right? Like we haven't even entered a current or a new password, right? And we're already filling their screen with red error messages, right? Like, neither is that welcoming, nor does it like actually provide any help at all. It makes the user think they did something wrong when they've done nothing at all. But we talked about prioritization. Now we looked at a whole bunch of errors, right? So how do we know that when we fix a problem that we've actually done anything good, right? Like, that's a big problem, right? You need to be able to show your investors. I need to be able to show my boss. We all need to be able to show our users that we've actually made something better, right? And now we'll know we're on the right track. So you got to measure stuff, right? You guys will talk about KPIs and metrics, and they're all the same, right? It's just about talking about measuring what matters. And we're going to talk a little bit about measurement now. This is a chart, a lovely chart, I might add, of 30-day actives for my product. Number of users going up every day. Do we feel good about that? Who feels good about that? Nobody feels good about that? You don't want to see this chart? Or you guys are all growing faster than this? Yeah, we feel good about this, right? Yeah, we feel strong. What about this? Oh, ooh, rumble. We feel less good about this, right? Like, something's wrong. Okay, we're getting a lot of people in the door. Are we keeping them? No, we're not keeping them, right? Our existing users are going down. We might not have long to live. As soon as this piece dries up, as soon as we stop attracting new users through the door, we're done, right? And that's going to be around the corner. So I want to point out that getting metrics right is really, really hard. And as Darth Vader shows you here bowling, yes, this is a thing. He can make the metrics look any way he wants, right? Okay? And I kind of just did that with like our customer acquisition, right? I was able to like get the ball back into the middle. Look, investor, new users coming every day, right? It doesn't last very long, and that's not very real, right? It's a pretty ephemeral view of what is actually going on in our business here. So there is some stuff that's easy to measure, right? Like really around performance, right? Are we getting things right? Is it fast, right? Are we crashing all the time, right? That stuff's good. But they don't really quite get at the measures of like how the user is doing, how the user's getting on with your product. So let's talk a little bit about how to think through that problem, okay? And we're going to talk about goals, we're going to talk about signals, and we're going to talk about metrics, which will all sound better with an example. So when you think about how you want users to interact with your product, right, you need to be able to articulate that, right? Something like, I want our users to really enjoy the content we're providing, right? Let's say you have a website, right? And what kind of signals are we going to get from users that suggest that we're on the right track, right? We don't have to jump to metrics yet. What kind of signals do we have that something might be going well? Well, how much time users spend engaging with content, right? How many articles they read, right? Like things like this. Do we get a sense that they wouldn't be there, right? They wouldn't be there, they wouldn't be consuming the content if they weren't having a good experience. Okay, now we're ready to talk about metrics, right? Right? We have a sense for like what we really care about when thinking about our users, and we have a sense for like kind of where to go looking for the right metric. Right? And then you can think about what's specific, quantifiable, something you have access to that you can report on, right? And for this, a good example might be average minutes per session, right? A user coming along and going, okay, the average user is spending 5 minutes on my site, right? Now I have something I can work around, right? And when I build new features, I can come back to this metric and go, am I making that go up or down, right? And if I'm not affecting it at all, am I building the right features, right? Because we've decided, right, before we've even gotten to metrics that this is something we care about. All right, I want to take a look at one of my favorite examples. Does everybody know what this site does? Just checking if you're still paying attention. What's a good goal for Google search, right? Like a good goal for Google search is users finding what they need on the first try, right? That's what we said we're trying to do, right? As a search engine, right? It's like you come here, you ask us a question, we give you a bunch of answers. Did we get it right, right? We feel good about that as a good goal. What's a good signal? Clicks on the first page. Okay. The right answer. Yeah. Good. Okay. So like what might be a signal that we got the answer right? Whoa. Do you work for Google as well? Are you cheating? I feel like you're cheating. A good signal might be how quickly users return to search, right, after clicking on the first result, right? As you correctly pointed out, right, a great signal about whether we got something right is after they said, okay, Google, I will see if you got this right, and clicks on that first result, right? If they come immediately back, right, exactly. If they come immediately back, we know we didn't solve their problem, right? We didn't answer their question, right? If they don't come back, right, or come back later and later and later, right, we have a better signal that we got it right, right? So now we're ready for metrics. What might be a good metric here? You're 90% of the way there. Just crush it. Yeah. Number of searches? Yeah, but we know what we really want to measure, right, is like how fast they came back. So we use something called average click duration, right, which is pretty simple. It's actually just measuring what you guys told me was important to measure, right, which is the whole point about developing metrics, right? Let the metric, like the actual data point come last, right? First, you have to decide that what you're measuring actually matters, right, and is a reliable signal for what you're trying to do. Couple words of caution, though, because you can get into what we like to call analysis paralysis of all this data, right? Is, any metric you come up with, any KPI, any whatever PI is always going to be partial and incomplete, right? You're never going to be able to tell a full story, right? There's no perfect measurement likely to solve your problem. And there's always going to be something that's going to surprise you, something you didn't know was there, right? So you are going to have to revisit your metrics as you go along. But always start from that place of deciding that, hey, I know that what I'm measuring actually matters to me, right? And then we'll figure out exactly what data point it should be. We're almost done. I promise. You guys are on the home stretch. So what have we done so far today, right? We've figured out what our users need, right? We met them where they are, okay? We figured out who we wanted to be. We built something. We made a whole bunch of mistakes and prioritized how to fix them. We then went through and made sure that the foot that we were putting forward into the marketplace was a foot that felt meaningful to us, right? It was something excellent, right? We went through and corrected all those things that doesn't make users feel welcome. And we're also measuring how the business is doing. This is good. We can go meet investors. Product development never sleeps, okay? And I wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about running experiments and the importance of running experiments. And many of you guys are already doing this. I'm sure you're already doing this. But let's talk a little bit about that for those of you who aren't. And it really just speaks to the fact that product development is this iterative cycle, right? You're gonna come up with something, you're gonna back it with all the research of your users, you're gonna build it, you're gonna launch it, and then you're just gonna learn, and you're gonna do it over and over and over again, rinse and repeat. Why do experiments in the first place, okay? You're gonna do it because it helps you answer critical questions, right? It's gonna help you make decisions. You're also going to be able to see if something's broken, like did what I just build make my product better or worse, right? And you're also going to be able to optimize for something, right? You're going to go, is this change moving us toward that local maxima? Okay, how do you guide what you're going to experiment on, right? One of my favorite sayings, okay, is you're going to test your next riskiest assumption about how your product works, about where you should go next, about what tweaks you need to make, right, about what improvements you should focus on. Test your next riskiest assumption. What's the most important assumption you're making today? Experiment with that. Tomorrow, move on to the next one. Let's talk a little bit about types of experiments you could run, and really what kind of questions they're good at answering. And we're going to use a bunch of examples from Search. One thing you can do is answer the question, is it a good idea? I have an idea for this change. Or someone on my team thinks this is a good idea, right? Well, let's just test it out. Let's run an experiment. We're gonna tie this straight back, right, to the metrics we decided that matter, but we're gonna say, okay, is it better or worse, right, when I put the photo there? That's an easy question to answer. Which variant is best, right? You can run A, B, C, D experiments, right, which are gonna tell you of the couple of options that you could go forward with, which one is performing the best, right? And you can go with that. Another one you can do is, did I do it right? Did what I build actually work, right? Is it broken? Is it working as intended? Did I break something that I didn't know was going to happen? Experiments are also great for that. And finally, how do users react, right? Do they scream and yell? Do your support queries go up? Do they call you? Do they show up at your house? How are users reacting to changes that you're making, right? And you'll be able to see that both in the metrics and by talking to them as well, right? And then you'll know if the changes you're making are making your users happier or sadder. Bringing it all together. I told you we were close to being done. Okay. Product development is very, very hard, and you guys have already built some incredible things. And I'm very excited to work with you guys. This is my little rundown of the entire product development process. You're knowing your users. You're going to meet them where they are, right? Talk to them, understand their problems and how you can be of service to them. Define and constantly iterate on what value you're bringing to them, what you're going to build. Prioritize what to do. Make sure that you're prioritizing the things that are actually going to impact your users. Avoiding the pitfalls, right? Be honest, bring that intellectual honesty to your product and make sure that it's providing the right environment for your users to be successful. And measure how you're doing, right? But make sure that you don't get into this trap of coming up with metrics because they're readily available to you. Think hard about which metrics actually give you a sense that you're doing the right thing. And finally, run a bunch of experiments and have fun along the way, because that's the best way you can actually arrive at something better. So that's it for me. Obrigado. Thank you very much. I have an awesome little catch box for questions. So please, anybody have questions? Yes, okay. Thank you for bailing out me there. Okay. This is a little bit, maybe you can pass this up behind you.
We right now are having some difficulty between business and development, especially because we are not being clear in specify what is the feature or what is the need of the user. What do you guys do to specify better for development?
Yeah, great question. Let me break that down into two parts. So one, I think, is helping the entire organization, not just the business folks, understand how your users are interacting with the product. The first thing you can do is get the whole team to participate in that user research, right? Seeing how users are struggling, right? That actually tends to really help the developers at your company understand the actual end game impact, right, that they're having, and why certain things need to be prioritized. That's one thing. So you want that concept to be flowing through the whole organization, right? I think the second thing you can do is simply sort of prove out your assumptions, right? You can run experiments and show that actually our metrics don't really look good, right? We need to focus our development effort on the stuff that's going to move the needle on the things we care about. That does require, though, that everyone in the organization kind of agrees on what we should care about, right? And I think that's maybe one of the first things to do to help bridge that gap is go make sure that everyone's on the same page about what should we care about? Do we have a common understanding of how our users should be navigating through our product? And once you do that, then data speaks a lot louder, right, to the whole organization. Maybe we can toss it up there.
Hi.
Hey.
And I wanted to ask you about, do you think we have a management problem in terms of what he seems to say is that probably one team, one silo, technical silo is playing the game of delivering features, and they have a hard time doing the thing in the horizontal, so making the value flow. So do you think could be interesting to have at the beginning of the product, starting with metrics about how is the user experience today without your application, without your product, and being that thing that you do as the whole goal of your product, instead of having process metrics or product metrics, instead doing something a little more in terms of having measuring, for instance, how many minutes these guys takes to reach a cab or whatever.
Yeah,
in the current world, without your solution.
Absolutely, right? Because at the end of the day, there's a bunch of reasons people build companies, right? The ones that actually survive are the ones that are solving an actual problem that exists, right? It's the ones that don't survive are the ones that build tech to solve a problem that doesn't exist, right? Inevitably, they pivot, right, to actually solve a problem if they're going to be successful. So I think the concept of using metrics to define a problem, to define a space that you guys want to get into, makes a ton of sense. But even before, again, you jump to metrics, understanding what the issue is, right, is even more fundamental than that, right? The classic example of the one you just gave would be, before we think about average minutes waiting for a taxi, I just want to get where I need to go as fast as possible, right? Time is money, right? I don't want to wait, right? That's a problem, right? Now you have a problem. What's a good signal, right? That the market doesn't have a solution for what you want to do. Well, actually, it's a line of people waiting at a cab stand at the airport, right? Exactly. It's a bunch of people in the rain, right? Waving their hands, trying to get a cab, right? Those are good signals, right? And now you've got a metric, right? Average time waiting for a taxi. Maybe just send it that way and... Whoa, nice.
Gotta make it work. Matt, I'd like to hear a bit from you that you mentioned how the expectations of users are getting higher and higher. And how do you think that this particular issue relates to the MVP concept? Do you think it creates some kind of problem?
Does it create a problem? That's a great question. I don't think so. I think the MVP problem, is actually kind of a different one. It's that it's this idea of completeness, right? This minimum viable product idea is such an overloaded term these days, right? People think oh, I gotta come forward with this. Something that feels complete, feels done, right, to get out the door. And I really it's really more of a minimum delightful product, right? It just has to work on the one thing, right, that they need to solve. And I think what you'd find is that if you're solving a problem worth solving, even a buggy a buggy app that kind of solves the problem. Like users are willing to deal with that, right? If it solves a fundamental need. So I don't actually think they're super related. I mean, I think that the highest expectations piece just means that like you need to be mobile, right? And you need to be doing something that matters to them because there's like, it's hard to stand out from the crowd, right? Like everyone's trying to, let's say, solve the things that their parents used to do for them with an app right now, right? Like in San Francisco. And that's like actually not like a great model, right? You might have some early success, but those aren't the businesses that are going to survive forever, right? Like I think when I say highest expectations, it's like you have to bring something new, right? You have to bring something new. You have to bring something startling, like something that like I never thought could be solved with technology, right? You got to come solve that with technology. I think how you then deliver it to the market is where you get this idea of an MVP, right? And like that's the thing. You just need to make sure that you got the right trade-offs on.
Okay, so I have two questions, but one is priority.
You're only allowed one. No, I'm just kidding.
Okay. My question is about when you're developing business-to-business products, it gets kind of hard to do user research, and many times you have to like build something to have any interest from the other part to see what you're talking about. And many times we spend a lot of time drawing or designing something that we get out of our heads, just so we have a single moment to show it to other companies. Do you have any tips on how can we improve our process of researching when developing business-to-business products?
Yeah, that's a good question as well. So I would challenge you a little bit that it's hard, right? I mean, like you still have users there. I think where you do get a challenge, right, is on the pitch, right? It's hard to get in the front door to pitch them on like why they should use your solution for their problem. But just talking to them and understanding their problem, like people who have that kind of job, it doesn't need to be, right, in the offices. You don't need to get past reception to talk to people who have that job or have experience of that role and its challenges, right? So I would like, one of the things I would advise you to do is kind of like separate those two ideas, right? Like when you're doing user research, it's actually very rare that you're bringing them a solution to react to. The only cases that you do that are really on things like usability studies, right? When you're trying to see how they use something new. When you're talking to users, it's much more important to listen than to talk, right? Like you want to hear what problems they have without jumping to solutions, right? That listening is actually the best way to make sure that you're not doing or saying anything wrong, right? So I would say like find those users, right, who work for those companies. It doesn't have to be in the context, like actually, you know, behind the walls of the company.
Question I had was our company is very driven to, how can I say this? We have a mobile app, and in order to improve our app, we always have to describe the feature list for the next versions in the next year, and have a budget for the features. And sometimes we haven't even launched something and seen if it has some fit on the user journey. And it sometimes gets challenging because you have to prove your idea will bring money to the company, and you don't even know if it works yet. And already know the next step and the other. And I believe this is a thing of cultural change in the company. Do you have any tips on where to start changing this culture?
Cool. So I do think there is a product cultural element to it, right? Like many of you guys have been talking with us about hiring and about sort of like, you know, how to get people on board with the right mission, the right set of skills, et cetera. There is very much a culture at Google which has survived even after 15 years of like launch and iterate, right? Experiment, test things, break things. Mark Zuckerberg from Facebook used to tell his engineers that like he wouldn't be happy with them unless they broke something, right? Because breaking something is actually a sign that you're being risky, you're taking chances, right? You're working fast. So I do think you have to sort of start with the leadership of the organization, right? And make sure that you're all singing the same tune, right? It also should impact how you think about hiring, right? You should hire people who are like ambitious and want to break things and want to try stuff and have a track record of doing that, right? Which is something you can definitely ask them to talk about. I think there's another thing about getting people okay with those cultural changes is, again, like down to experiment, right? Like as you just described, sometimes it's hard to convince someone to do something when you can't actually like prove anything yet because you don't have anything. We're going to have a session later in the week about things like prototyping, right? Where you can run some really low-cost experiments, right, to prove that you're onto something. Take these iterative steps, right? These small steps, like this idea of incrementality, right? Like if you get people to take a little step here, it's easier for them to take another step, right? And there's actually very cheap ways to test almost anything, right? Like people often think they need to put code to screen in order to actually prove out an idea. It's never the case, right? Like I'm constantly actually drawing things on paper and showing it to people and asking them to like give their feedback. And there actually is an experiment, right? Like I now have some data to take another step forward. Ooh. Hi.
Hey. Yeah, you mentioned the MVP problem. MVP seems very subjective. How do you know when the minimum has been reached and you're ready to launch it?
I have no idea. It's honestly a constant struggle. I think there's a few things. I think there's a few things that do help, but I really have no idea. I mean, one thing that helps is you bring this product, right, internally, right, to people who are willing to test stuff, right? And you just see like if they can do what they want to do with it, right? Like what is the main thing that your app or your business is trying to deliver? Can they do that? If they can do that, right? And they're delighted by that, then it really doesn't matter if you have any of the other features, right? That's a good way to know. I think like, again, I would encourage, the only way to do it, right, is to think about who am I as a business and what 1, 2, 3, probably not more than 3 things, right, does my user actually need to do, right, in order to be successful with us, right? Once you've done that, ship it immediately, right? Because you need that feedback as fast as possible in order to actually figure out what to do next. You probably have a laundry list of things you think are worth doing, right? But you actually aren't going to unlock any of that until you get something out. So I ship broken stuff all the time. I actually should have reminded myself that this is videotaped before I said that. But I ship broken stuff all the time, right? Because like at the end of the day, if it solves the one thing I need it to solve, well then great. I can't actually take another step forward until I figure out what other needs I need to solve for my users. And a hush falls over the crowd with no more questions. All right. Oh, you got in there. Oh.
What do you think about UX and UI design and how it could integrate with agile teams and agile development?
Yeah, that's a great question. For those of you who didn't hear what he asked, I think I have superhuman hearing. I think the question was about what do you think about UX and how to integrate sort of the product with the other parts of the organization? Is that right? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, super important question, which we didn't really touch at all during the presentation. Product development only works well when you have UX, product, and engineering working as one team, right? That is just a bottom line answer that I can give you there, right? You as a product manager or as a founder, right, which I really think of very similarly, let me be clear, your job, okay, is to ship a product, but your job is actually to help make your team successful, right? And it's to provide the right inputs to each of your experts, right? Your experts in design, your experts in code, so that they can produce the best output, right? And while they're producing that output, your job is to get things out of their way, right? Either that's making decisions, getting them the resources they need, removing roadblocks. So at the end of the day, when you're defining what to build, though, nothing happens unless you're working closely with UX and engineering, because it's the only way to do things right.
Great, excellent answer. I think mostly here in Brazil we have problems with silos, and we have a lot of problems.
It's true everywhere.
Let me ask you a question. Do you know if you are using inside Google? There's a guy who's Alan Clement, and the guys from Intercom. They're putting to rest user stories and doing the job story thing. Do you know something about that, of job to be done and job stories?
I don't know if I know it. I don't know if I know exactly. I know that we're constantly sort of evolving this language around excellent products, and particularly around user definition. And I know it's evolving sort of into this idea of like having a goal, but also combining what you know about your user and particularly their constraints, right? As you think about as we were talking about before, like the next billion users coming on board, like you have to add in this new layer of like constraints and market realities and connectivity that like Google hasn't really ever had to struggle with before. So I do think that like necessitates us coming up with like a richer story of who the user is, but that's like the most that I know about.
Yeah, the thing is, user story is more for solution, and job story is more for needs. So basically, you said something about that in terms of having a backlog of needs, not of solutions, features.
Cool.
But it's like, okay, thanks.
There's one down here. Oh, look out. Your glasses will be paid for by Google. Yeah.
Hello, Matthew.
Hey, bud.
I have a question for you. We are experiencing a recurring question here in Campus Sao Paulo with all the teams we're working with, the startups. It's actually how do you align sales teams with product team, especially at the beginning, since salespeople are on startups are the one who kind of like own the customer voice. My question is very simple. What are your tips to align the product development with the sales strategy? It's a question coming over and over, and I'm very curious to hear what you...
I thought that we discussed that the Googlers would ask softballs. I felt like that was part of the agreement that we had.
This is a tricky one because I don't know what to say to the startup. So
I'll tell you, this will be the easiest question for me to give the most honest answer. So right now I work in the ads business, and the sales teams in a way are very disconnected. They're out there selling. They live in a different building, right? And they're spread all over the world. And it is a constant struggle, right? The sales teams, often complain to us that we're not listening, right? We're not prioritizing the right things, that we're not hearing them. The product teams too often put the sales teams in this sort of support role, right? Like we go, this product sells itself, right? Just like deal with it, right? So I do think one of the fundamental things lacking is empathy, right? Is empathy between these two teams, and empathy does start from the top, right? Like you guys as founders, right? You need to create that empathy within your org, right? Such that everyone feels part of the same team, feels bought in on the same mission. I'll give you a couple of examples of how we've tried to do this on our side. One is bringing sales into the product development and prioritization process, right? Like making sure that you carve out some development time to address some of the sales team's top issues. When you can do it, great, you do it. And when you can't do it, you be honest with them about the fact that you can't do it or don't have resources, and you explain why, right? I think one of the biggest mistakes that product teams make is they go, yes, of course, we'll get to it, I swear, and we say that over and over and over again and never do it, right? That doesn't lead to any more trust or any more dialogue, right? On the sales side, right, I think drag your product people and your engineers out to meet the clients, right? You guys are relationship managers, right, as sales folks, and also user experience researchers, right, because of your proximity to the customers, right? So go grab those people, right? Make sure that they feel the pain that you're feeling, right? Because at the end of the day, if you're just sort of shouting into the wind at the product and engineering team, they might not always feel it, right? Like you got to get them out in front of the customer, right, so they can see your pain. What I do anyway is just try to involve the teams early and often in the process, like what we're doing and also critically what we're not doing, right? So that at least everyone is on the same page about what's going to be possible. I'll have a longer think about that question though, because I do think it's a big issue, and the thing is, it's all going to hit you guys the minute you grow, and like it'll already be on you before you realize it, right? And so I'll give some thought to that and have a better answer for you.
Already good, thank you.
All right. Up there, up top, you guys are making this real hard. Whoa, look out. That was nice.
Hi, Matt.
Hey.
Do you believe the whole team should start to use analytics from the day one?
Do you think the which team?
The whole team of the startup should use analytics from day one?
Should use analytics. Yeah, I mean, so actually Google Analytics is free, at least the basic version. I think what product you use is less important than the fact that you start collecting data, right, and clean data, and start developing sort of an analytical culture within your organization. You know, if you went to Emily's session yesterday about data, that in and of itself is sometimes a Herculean challenge, right? Just to make sure that everyone is collecting the right stuff, talking about the same stuff, looking at it, that we have access to it. I think if Google Analytics matches your use case, right, about what you need from the data and what kind of analysis you want to do on a regular basis, then you absolutely should use it. And especially, I would say, while you're here, right, rely on Kelly's expertise, right, who works with clients every day about, is an absolute analytics ninja. So I would definitely say, even if you're not sure you want to use it, get some walkthroughs these next couple weeks and see if it matches what you need.
Thank you.
Sure. All right, I'm seeing some fatigue on everyone's faces. So going once, going twice. Thank you guys very much.